Well, welcome to the Brook Hill Podcast. Today we have a special guest, the Jared Kilpatrick. Thank you to our live audience. Jared was three-time senior counselor of the Appaloosas.
Yep.
One of your new guys was just waiting outside to meet you. Didn't get a chance to meet you, but new Appaloosa counselor coming in this summer. And so actually second Appaloosa counselor we've had on the podcast, Jay Swinningson, not too long ago.
Yep.
When did you start at camp?
So I started as a third grade camper.
Okay.
I did all my 7 years as a camper. JC'd for 3 years. Came on all summer. And did 3 years all summer in the Apple bunkhouse.
And you were in the Lake Charles. Were you Lake Charles?
Natchitoches.
Natchitoches. I always get that confused. I always thought you were the Lake Charles bus crew.
The Louisiana group all gets shoved together.
Yeah, but you're in they call them the Natty Bergs this year, the Natchitoches. We have a ton of Natchitoches counselors now, the Jets and the Jensens and the
which is crazy because when I was
and
here,
the Callies.
I was the only one.
No, I bet you we have 5 or 6 plus, and I'm sure I didn't mention someone's name and they'll get upset, but that's okay. They'll get over it. Just to let everybody know, Jared now, and gosh, I'm going to get your title wrong. Are you still a detective?
I am.
He's still a detective. He's still a detective. I didn't mean it like that, but you basically left Brook Hill, got married, like literally, and started your career in law enforcement.
Yes.
Which is just super exciting. So, this is the Life Legacy Leadership Podcast. And, you went from being a leader at Brook Hill now to being a camp counselor for Louisiana. You went from the red T-shirt to the blue T-shirt or whatever it is that you wear now. Yeah. But it's still leadership.
It is.
Leadership is leadership. People are people. Your bunkhouse is just a little bigger than it used to be.
And a little more rowdy.
I don't know. Those Appaloosas might have gotten rowdy back in the day. I love it. So, man, tell us a little bit about your experience at camp and, kind of the squad you work with. What were your years?
I was all summer 07, 08, and 09.
Okay. So that was 08 was the financial crisis, and that was when the 2 week ended.
Yep.
You were in a lot of changes there going on for Brook Hill.
So I actually, looking back at my time as a camper and a counselor, I was actually here for a lot of different transitions. So when I first came as a camper, Hetty was still doing story time.
Okay.
Jadine was still camp director.
Yeah.
Stephen was still the Hackney cabin.
Yep.
Third grade, my very first summer, I was in your cabin.
Come on.
Yeah, you were my first counselor.
Let's go.
Yeah. And so, but I come as third grade. I go home. I come back. You're married. you're here. I think you were doing like helping on the grounds and stuff. Steven's starting to help out. That transition starts happening, and then over the years, you and Lynn kind of step more into an involved role with camp, and just being part of all that transition. So I mean, from when I first came as a camper, Jadine, Hetty coming and doing story time, through Stephen, you, Lynn being co-camp directors doing stuff whenever I left off the hill, and everything that went in between, just the transitions of activities and how stuff was done. Looking back on it, there was a lot of change, because before that you had decades where the same person was camp director. You had Cato here for a long time. Thinking back, that was a lot of transition, a lot of change over a period of time. And so thinking back on it, looking back, I'm really thankful that I got to kind of experience all of that.
Absolutely. Were you here during Cato? Were you a third grader, or was Jadine literally, was that transition?
That was, I was never here with Cato.
Okay.
So
okay.
My first memory was Jadine.
Okay.
Riding that 4-wheeler through the front doors of the pavilion.
Yeah. What was your first cabin?
Yours?
So mine was the first cabin. So what year was that? Is that 99? Had to have been 99.
Had to have been. Well, now I'm wondering if that was my first cabin.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe that was my second year.
Okay. It may have been because I was, when Steve was in the Hackneys, I was an AC.
Okay.
So that kind of, yeah. Okay.
All right.
Cool. So I may have been the fourth grade summer or something.
But I remember being in some cabins with some guys that I think one year.
Yeah, who'd you have? Name off some of your guys.
Simon.
Yep.
You for sure. Mitchell. I was in the Buckskins. Mitchell. I don't think I was ever in the Mavericks with Tim. I know I'd done the Morgans, I think twice, Broncos. I was never in the Walkers, never in the Hackneys. I'd done the Apples, Buckskins, all that stuff. So it was, I didn't stay in the same cabin all the time. I wasn't, as a camper at least, I wasn't, specific to.
But see, I like asking people who their counselors were, because the fact that you remember means that they made an impact on your life.
Oh, yeah. Keith DeSaunier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on.
And that's just from being in cabins. I mean, John.
What do you remember?
Kevin
What do you
Rawls.
remember about their cabins? What do you remember about some of those guys?
So especially, I think compared to some of the guys I was on staff with, what I remember the most about some of those guys was how laid back they were.
Interesting.
I remember Keith being goofy, but in the cabin was laid back.
Yeah.
I remember Simon. He was always having a good time on stage, but off stage he was more chill, laid back. Same thing with Mitchell. I mean, he's always laid back.
Yep.
And so I don't know. Maybe that's more my personality. So those are the guys I remember the most.
Yeah.
But
was I laid back in the bunkhouse?
No, you were hyper competitive, and it was all we were. Of course, I was also a super shy little kid at the time.
That doesn't describe me at all.
No.
I was misjudged. Okay. What did camp teach you as a camper? What made you? I mean, I'm assuming you wanted to come back year after year. Your parents didn't make you, but what made you want to come back?
There's so many things as a camper, as a counselor, but as a camper, at least after the first couple of years, it felt like home.
Okay.
It was always it was things changed, but camp didn't change. Faces changed, but I knew no matter what was happening at home, no matter what was happening in school, I knew that the 1 week I was here, I knew what to expect. Even I used to joke with my wife for years after I was done being on staff and had moved into to the next thing. During the summer, the schedule's memorized. It's ingrained in your head. This is when I saw it up on the wall. I was like, yeah. But I mean, I would literally be at work and be like, oh, well, it's 4:00 on Tuesday. They're doing such and such.
Yeah, come on.
They're doing it Thursday night. You're like, I need to. They're at Hoedown about to go to crucifixion right now.
Yep.
Like Friday night, you're like, man, carnival night is happening right now for years.
Wow.
And just knowing that started back in the third grade of like you knew what was here. It was stable.
Stability. God, there's one thing we need today. It's stability.
Absolutely.
I mean, kids especially. As adults, I think we have to provide that stability, right? We have to be that for our communities, for our, states, wherever we're at, our churches. We have to be that for them.
Even when they don't know that's what they need.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right, man. I love that. So that's what Brook Hill was for you. So what made you put on the red T-shirt? So you were JC for 3 summers.
3 summers.
3 summers.
I mean that was just went through camp. Did JCT years graduate. That was the next thing to do. I didn't want to give up camp. I mean I don't know how many people are really honest about that, but for me it was I'm going to go be a JC because I'm not done with camp.
Right.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Yeah.
And y'all, I mean, and y'all were very upfront about that at staff training, the first JC training. That you're like, hey, you're not a camper anymore. This isn't for you. If you're just here to be a camper. And I was like, well, we'll see. I'm not leaving. I still want to get hired.
Right.
But I came in just I want to be here, and it took off from there.
What was that first week like? What was that? I mean, obviously you worked really hard, I'm sure. I mean, you're a hard-working guy, so that the hard work probably didn't bother you, did it?
No, and that was actually one of the things I had kind of a flaw or a weakness as a counselor was I'm naturally an introvert. not super outgoing with people, but I will do anything work-wise you ask me to do. And so when you get here, like JC was kind of my thing. Like, play with kids when you can, but somebody's got to take out the trash. And I was like, I got the trash. I got the water balloons. You want this entire floor bleached and mopped? I got you. And then it's like, and then eventually they're like, hey, can you step up in front of 300 people and talk? And I'm like, isn't there a bathroom to clean? Somebody else, that's John Martin. Let him do that.
Right.
Let Blake get up and talk in front of people.
Right.
I'm going to go squeegee off the wagon or whatever. And, but when you work for Steven Sexton and for you, and that's not an option. A time came where you had to step up and get outside of your comfort zone,
which is so good.
Absolutely.
I mean, what did that teach you to have to get up? I mean, you didn't want to do that, but to have to do that. I mean, what did that teach you? What did that do in you? Because I think all of us want to be comfortable. We naturally want to play it safe. We naturally don't want to get so like for me, I did sheepdog training with Tim Kennedy in January.
Okay.
I did Protector 1, and basically we did 7 hours of jiu-jitsu. I've never done jiu-jitsu. Never, I played tackle football. That's the most physical I've been, was playing football 1 year in Pee Wee, right? And day 2, so we did 3.5 hours and then 3.5 hours. Day 2, I thought I just got to survive this thing. And this is probably stuff you do all the time. But it was out of my comfort zone, and it did something in me to disrupt the comfortable, right?
Right. Absolutely. I think it was Lindsay that talked about it when she was on here, but just part of something that the staff gets taught is being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And whether it is
so good,
the heat or the rain or an awkward camper that you're having to interact with, whatever the case is, there's no other circumstance or situation I can think of that as a 18, 19, 20-year-old you're being at times put in responsibility of 300 people. I mean, my third year on staff, head of the hill, I'm making decisions, doing stuff that, I mean, I'd been trained up for all those years, but it was still, I don't know very many places where 20-year-olds are given that much responsibility.
Sure. But you were ready.
I didn't think I was ready at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I specifically remember my first year getting hired all summer. Steven, I filled out the application, I sent it in. And I remember when Steven called me, and I actually pretty much told him I didn't think I deserved it. I didn't think I was worthy of being a senior counselor. And looking back, it's kind of hilarious that Sexton had to talk me into it.
Right.
That 3 years as a JC, you get this opportunity. This is what you do.
Right.
You take over cabin and you do the thing. And here I am sitting in my truck in a parking lot on a Friday night, talking to Steven Sexton and telling him, like, I don't think I'm good enough for that.
But why do you think you felt that way? Is it because of the guys you looked up to and you thought, I'm not those guys?
Probably. Yeah.
And so, what's funny, so you're talking about the Brookses, the Tim Bartons, the Mitchells. What's funny is those were my campers, right? Because I was the era right before your counselors.
Right.
And, I remember looking at them. I remember Keith DeSaulnier, hours in the shower. Oh, my God. Me and Simon talked to Keith DeSaulnier for hours and hours and hours, probably weren't supposed to. But just trying to pour into him, being like, God's got a call in your life, Keith. And this is just one moment of obviously what you're going to do later in life. But it's poured into his life, and then he pours into your life. And this, it's just such the discipleship deal. Mm-hmm. But you didn't feel like you were worthy of those guys, right?
Right. Well, and that was, worthy of them, or I could live up to them. My personality, I didn't want to disappoint people. So, that included you and Steven. Like, I knew who I was coming to work for. And that all of that was going through my head is like, this isn't just like, I'm going to go give this a try, and if I'm not good at it, oh, well. Like, there's a lot on the line.
Yeah.
And that is one thing I've always loved what y'all did. One of the things that Brook Hill taught me, being on staff taught me, one of the things that a lesson that I feel like is really taught here or caught more or less. Obviously, honor God,
Right.
but the honoring those that came before us,
Hmm.
and understanding that we are their fruit, and like that's going all the way back to Hetty and everybody in between, and the little conversations here and there. Like I remember JC, I think it was my second year JCing, I was in Brooks's bunkhouse, and like I remember after the evaluation, kids are gone, evaluations are turned in, all that's done, and he still takes the time, sits down with me on the front steps, and we have like a 30-minute conversation about future and life and everything. And just stuff like, I might not remember every word that was said, but I remember that conversation took place. I remember that he could have done anything. I remember those times. You're ready to go. You're ready to go meet up with everybody. You're ready to go eat. You're ready to do whatever. And it was still, second year JC, let me have a conversation.
Yeah. Once you became all summer staff, you knew that his obligation to have that talk with you really was over.
No, it was absolutely over.
But that's how incredible Brooks was, right?
Yep.
That, and that conversation meant the world to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that Simon did the same thing for me. And it meant the world to me. And it's amazing. We just need someone to call that thing that is inside of us, right? That gifting, Stephen would say the greatness, right? Mm-hmm. That thing that God has put inside of us. We need someone just to call it out of us, right? Hetty would say, call them up, that was her thing, which, by the way, let's go ahead and do a shameless plug right now, Tyler. October 7th, Hetty, we're doing a legacy dinner right here.
All right.
So instead of me having to call you, I can just tell you on the podcast right now.
I actually tried to buy tickets to the April date.
Yeah, so we had to move. We got some negative feedback on the date. So
right.
October 7th.
Okay.
So we want to have y'all out there. That's right. Make it happen. We met with Hetty this morning. So we want to do actually do more of these to be able to honor different. Obviously, Hetty's the goat. She's the one to honor first, right? But then to honor different people. So that'd be really cool.
Well, and there are probably dozens of those moments. But one thing talking about the transition that I got to be a part and see so much transition and change happen. Having multiple camp directors for my era of counselors was absolutely God timing.
I never thought about that. Okay,
because
explain.
Whether it's generational or whatever the culture was at the time, at least for me. So most of my conversations with Stephen were getting called into an office, and it was, what are you doing with this?
Sure.
How are you going to do it? What's the plan? This is what you need to do. Go do it. And then we're done. And and I was super thankful for that. I needed somebody to be that stern and give that direction.
And challenge you.
But then the next week I'd be in the staff room on my off activity, and you probably don't remember, but you walked in, you're like, hey, come ride with me. And we jumped in, I think it was a Tahoe, and literally just spent the next 45 minutes riding around the ranch talking.
Come on.
About life, talking about what comes next. And so I got this balance of, and the weekends, that was a time when kind of on the weekend everybody went to somebody's house. So there were people were at Tim and Terry's, people were at y'all's house, people were at Lynn. So I got time with Mike and Lynn on the weekend at their house.
Yep.
And so there was just this 3 very different personalities, 3 very different leadership styles, and I got all of it. And I'm very thankful for that.
Wow. I love that. Anything else that you can think of that you took away, are there things that you use now, that you use now, maybe even as an officer, in your leadership of other officers or whatever, what is there anything that you use from camp that you still use today?
Oh, the things that camp taught me that still have day-to-day use in my life, we don't have time to go into the list. Matter of fact, listening to some of the other episodes of this, I think I told you, I've never been able to put that into words. And I'd hear somebody say something, and I was like, yeah, that happened at camp. But whether I did time on patrol, and then I moved into investigations. I also serve in some other specialized areas, and just, I mean, we already talked about being comfortable, being uncomfortable, that I've been in some situations,
Sure.
Whether it was physically or mentally or emotionally uncomfortable, or were chaotic. I remember one of the big things we kind of talked about, maybe not in these words, but the concept of controlled chaos. That a lot of people would look at that schedule and be like, why, this is a kids camp, why are we so structured? Well, that structure allowed us to be spontaneous. That structure allowed us to be fun. And so just building that into, whether it's me with my family, my household, I also serve as the men's pastor at my church, so doing stuff with the men, worked in kids ministry, youth ministry, college ministry before it ended up in men's stuff. And so there's a lot of times we have meetings, and I'm like, hey, we need to talk, we need to have logistics, we need to plan, and they're like, we'll just figure it out. And I'm like, no, we figure it out now so we can have fun later.
That's
Like,
good.
I know I'm not the fun guy, but like, we don't get to, it's more fun when we have this, and that is 100% from camp. And then just dealing with people, interacting with people. You wouldn't think that my experience dealing with a tough camper, but when you have to sit there and process, you have to see them, you have to stop what you're doing and go make contact with them. Then you have to sit there and walk through, okay, so it's not this problem, it's not this problem, they don't even want to talk to me. And walking through getting somebody that is completely closed off, somebody that doesn't want to talk to you, somebody that's hurt or is dealing with something, to open up, talk to you, and then end up going and playing foosball or tetherball and having fun with you. Like, if you'd have told me back then that I was going to use those same people skills, I wasn't even want to be in law enforcement. I've been like, yeah, whatever, this is a camp thing. But how often do I deal with people that are closed off, that don't want to talk to me? They're dealing with hurt or trauma or whatever, and we just slow the pace down, walk through it, and try to find some common ground, try to show some people that know me that are watching this, when I say compassion, empathy, they're going to be like, yeah, okay. But
that's your line.
Yeah.
That's the one you say all the time.
No, they're like, Jared doesn't know what compassion and empathy is.
Oh,
but,
okay.
It really, so back home, there's a lot of people that don't know about camp and don't know my history. They never experienced me as a counselor here. And so when I tell them stories about camp, they're like, you did what?
You were fun.
Yeah, you what? But part of my personality is, talk about, I'm an introvert. I'm in a career field that tends to be more serious.
Sure.
It shows you a darker side of things, and so it's not always easy to be lighthearted and fun, but you have to be. Mm-hmm. And there's still that side. It's still there. When I tell people, and there's a picture of it somewhere. I don't know where, and I hope we don't ever find it, but I know it's out there because I've seen the picture. But you know how the all-summer staff used to interrupt JCT meetings?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there was one night where me and Blake did that when you were leading the meeting, and apparently we took it a little too far.
Okay.
And it was kind of one of those, like, we got taught a lesson. And that lesson was...
I taught a lesson?
Yeah. So...
I joke around a lot.
We kept coming in, and apparently we came in one too many times, and every time we came in, we had upped the game on, like, we had costume or we had put something on.
Okay.
And the last time we came in, I had put on some, like, glittery fairy wings. And apparently we had not taken the hint that we weren't supposed to come back in.
Okay.
And so your solution to that was I was going to help lead Devos.
Okay.
With those wings on.
Oh.
So there's a picture somewhere of me standing up front at the Vesper benches.
Okay.
In a red T-shirt and a set of like glitter sparkly fairy wings.
Yes.
And so I tell people about that, and they're like, there's no way. I was like, oh, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea. Our matter of fact, our youth pastor just took over the youth pastor position at our church, was a camper when I was a counselor.
Okay.
And so I had a nickname at camp that...
It was Jer Bear.
It was.
I remembered it.
And he likes to break that out And people look at him like he is crazy because
Why are you saying that to
yeah,
Jared?
like, why are you just, but I just like, I smile and whatever.
Yeah.
And the first couple times he did it, you could tell people were like, what is he talking about? And why is
Yeah.
Jared okay with it?
Right.
And I was like, oh,
Seems disrespectful.
You have
This
no
seems-
idea.
yeah.
There are years of this. So,
Right.
but yeah, no, I can't put into words what camp as a place, as a family, the experiences, the things, the lessons I learned, the experiences I had, the friendships I've made. I mean, I'm still in contact with people. So
I love that.
it's phenomenal.
I love that. Yeah, I have to think when you were first starting out as an officer, it had to have given you a little bit of a leg up because, having to communicate with campers that were closed off. I mean, having to walk up to somebody you don't know, figure out who they are, get them to let their defenses down as much as they can, right? That had to have helped you, I would think.
I'm sure it did. I will also at least be transparent enough to say that when I first got started, I probably bought in a little too much to the type A alpha male, young, immature. We have to be cops. We have to be a certain way. And I was, probably a little more closed off, a little more
Sure.
just verbally aggressive or not. And that's something that I had to, okay, well, that didn't work.
Right.
And so, I mean, you do that and you're like, I think I'm supposed to act this way. I'm supposed to talk this way. And you're like, no, I'm not getting the results I would like to get right now. And so there was a time where it was like, all right, let's, you know better.
That's good.
You know different.
Yeah.
You know a better way. And so you just change the game plan and move on.
Yeah, yeah. Which obviously I want to say thank you for your service. I do want to make sure we say that. And obviously officers have gotten a bad name, over the last few years, and it's sad that. I mean, my goodness, it's just like saying all camps. I mean, there's camps where people have messed up, and so also all camps are. But you know what I mean?
Right.
I hate that is the thing, but I love having you on here to show here's the heart of probably more officers than not, who have a heart for their communities, especially probably in Louisiana where you're from and your teams. And so, thank you for that. And I know, what made you become an officer? What made you decide, because we talk about, do you remember the whole concept of build your own Brook Hill, right? Like when you leave here, we always tell our counselors, we don't want this to be your best moment. We want this to be your first moment, right? We want when you leave here that you make an even bigger impact than you did here, which obviously is what you're doing through men's ministry or whatever, but even on your job, because I know you don't see it as a job. You probably see it as a calling, right? This is what God has called me to.
Yeah.
And so what made you go into that?
So it's always what I wanted to do. I can't deny the fact. So my father was in law enforcement.
Okay.
Career, law enforcement, saw it my whole life growing up. I was around it. But even at a young age, that's what I've always wanted to do. And when people ask, why do you do this job? Why did you get into it? It might come across a little on the cheesy side. Yes, I absolutely believe it's a calling.
Sure.
Especially today, anybody that gets into law enforcement just because they need a job, they're not going to make it. At least not in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
They might make it to retirement, but they're going to be sliding in with a lot of issues and not healthy. You have to be called to it and genuinely believe in what you're doing. And where it came in for me was, as cheesy as it might sound, and there's Bible stuff, there's scripture that we could break out to back it up. But the bottom line is that there are bad people willing to do horrible things, and there have to be there are bad people willing to do violent things, and there have to be good people willing to go stop them.
Right.
And sometimes that's through a conversation, and sometimes it's not.
Right.
But the world we live in without good people, especially people who love God and seek justice while coming before you.
Something's going to lead.
Right.
Someone or something is going to lead. And it's going to be good or bad.
Yep.
Right? And if good, was it Edmund Burke said that all that's necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing, right?
Well, and even, in Scripture.
I think I botched that, but I think I got close.
What is expected of us to seek justice, love, mercy, and walk humbly before God. And so, obviously, I don't expect a lot of people to slap that up as a banner in police academies.
Sure.
But if that was the moniker or the underlying thought process being taught in police academies, then if that was the mindset, if I could get officers to slap that somewhere in their unit.
Say that again. Break that down. Give that again. I don't want to rush over that. That moniker, you said that the Scripture.
Yeah, we're supposed to seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before God. And so to understand that we have, whether you're law enforcement or not, we have an obligation we serve a just God.
Right.
And he loves justice, and he does not want to see people hurt. He doesn't want to see people manipulated and taken advantage of. But in that process, you have to love mercy as well. And the only way you can do that, the only way, in my opinion, in my experience, that you can seek justice and love mercy is walking in humility with God. That when I start thinking I'm better than other people, when I start thinking that I can do things and get away with it, that's when you start having problems. There's a lot of people out there that want to see justice done, but they don't know anything about mercy. And that's when we start having problems.
Yeah. So good. Well, one of the things we're doing here at Brook Hill, at least this is our second spring to do this. We call it the Bro Zoom. We've really seen, and I know Lindley does some things with the girls, but at least with our high school and college guys, we've just seen, that men need to step up more. And so obviously you do it as a job, but, I think if men are stepping up in every community, good men that you're talking about, godly men especially, are stepping up, I think we're going to have less of the bullying, right? The things that the gas stations or the subways, the stuff that's caught on camera or whatever, and that's why I did the sheepdog training, and that's not my first training. I've been doing some others. That was my first jiu-jitsu training. Yeah. But I feel an obligation to my family first, Brook Hill second, and then just in the community that, when something happens, what do you do? And if you have it trained, when a situation happens, you don't know how to react or how to respond, or a lot of times I think you're going to respond out of emotion, right? And usually respond wrong. Just the other day, I actually had something happen, not with this, but my son was rodeoing, and he was putting his horse in the trailer, and the horse stomped Tim Brooks's foot, I think broke it, and then runs off into a rodeo arena with a crowd of people. And I happened to be a good ways away, so he ran in my direction. So me and Tim Barton, Tim was there with me, of course, he's always there. Me and Tim Barton start going over to this horse, and obviously I know not to get in the way. It's bucking, and it's running, and it's going. But I literally don't know what to do. I'm not rodeo trained, right? So I'm put in a situation I don't know what to do. The horse, slides into a fence, and you hear all these men going, hold its head down, because it'll stay down. And then we were able to get the tack off of it or whatever for the horse to be okay. But then, we had to do some different things. But I had no idea what to do is the bottom line. I'm looking around. The men helped and get it up. And I was like, okay, next time I now know how to respond in this situation. Right. But I was just walking down the road. And all of a sudden, this horse runs at me, and of course, I wouldn't have bothered with it if it wasn't our horse, because I was like, all right, somebody else will do it. But that's kind of what we do in our society. Someone else will do it. I don't know what to do, right? But yet it was my responsibility.
Right.
And I told Tim Brooks, I was like, okay, now I know what to do next time. And that's why you got to go to these trainings. And if more people in our world were trained, I know it would make your job easier.
It would. Well, and before you even do physical training, a lot of it starts with mindset.
We did SA, situational awareness. We did that for 3 hours for you. So sorry to interrupt.
No, if there was there's a list of books, but if there was one book I could definitely recommend that I think most men would enjoy reading and would get a lot out of. It's called Men on Fire by Stephen Mansfield.
Okay.
He talks about 7 fires that kind of fuel and forge men, and one of them he calls it the fire of battle. But 2 things he talks about, and I loved it in the way he worded it in the book, was that the warrior spirit, and we're caught up in culture in a time where everybody wants to talk about toxic masculinity. You don't want to hear anything about warrior spirit and all that stuff. But if you look historically at different cultures that were warrior cultures, the warrior spirit, the way he says it is, it doesn't unlock demons, it keeps them in check. And that the warrior culture, a culture that has the warrior spirit, men that have the warrior spirit, it's a self-checking culture. That things don't get out of hand because they correct them themselves.
So good.
So if you have a group of men or whoever that have this concept of like, we're not just floating through life. Life is a fight. Not to be over the top cheesy or anything, but like it's a fight. And when you have
when you look through the Bible, that's what you see.
Right. And so when you walk with intentionality and you have that mindset, like he says, it doesn't unlock demons. Having a warrior spirit or warrior mindset doesn't make me a monster. It keeps that's what allows self-discipline. That's what allows me to keep the things that would make me a bad person in
the
check.
New Testament talks about the war of the spirit and the flesh inside of all of us, right? And that is literally the spiritual battle. It's what Christ comes into our lives and helps us overcome the flesh.
That's right.
Right? The undisciplined flesh that wants to run amok. I mean, that's literally that.
And once you get that in check, get yourself in check, and you get a group or a tribe or a whatever, you start seeing that being a self-correcting thing within that community. I mean, just look at staff. You might have somebody that struggles 9 months out of the year to be disciplined in a particular area. You might have somebody, even something as simple as they never wake up before 9 a.m. They're not morning people. But for 3 months out of the year, that whistle goes off at 6 a.m., lights are on, they're yelling good morning apples, getting everybody up, singing rise and shine, and 9 months out of the year, they're still asleep for 2 hours. But here, they're awake, they're dressed, they're taking care of other human beings, they're doing stuff, they're on a mission. And if you don't do that, at least when I was here, that wasn't something that you or Lynn or Steven had to deal with. One of the other guys was going to be like, get up.
Right.
We got work to do. Like, I don't feel good. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like, as harsh as that sounds, I remember that mindset being so, you're on that off activity and you're like, I'm exhausted and I don't want to go back out there right now. And it's like, and that I'm here for a reason. And putting that in check and going back to work.
But we need that. We
100%.
need people around us that are willing to call us out like that, right?
Absolutely.
They're like, you're getting too comfortable. Here, come on, this is the mission. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. Don't be a victim. Be a victor. Overcome. Push through.
But that only functions in relationship. You can't do that with strangers.
That's right.
And so, like, there have actually been times we went. I was up in Rogers in January and got some time with Steven. And it's crazy how years after being on staff, he will still look at me, ask a couple questions, and be like, "You need to do this," and I'm like, "Yes, sir." I think you're right. But that's just that was one of his giftings. Was calling stuff out of you.
Right.
I mean, I remember I got to go to the very first session of High Point. That was another thing. I was here during when all that started. And I remember being in a worship service at High Point, and, there's 60, 70 people in the room, and we're all former Brook Hillers. That was the only people that were there for that.
Right.
And I remember Stephen kind of called me out in a good way and kind of shared a word that he had for me. And I just remember, like, this wouldn't have happened anywhere else. I wasn't even supposed to be here. The way I ended up at that was complete random chance anyway. And so, like, I ended up being able to be at High Point when it started. I was in the room, had that word, and it changed a lot. And so you have to have those relationships for people to be able to do that for you.
So good. So is this a book that y'all do in your men's ministry?
We actually did walk through it. I tried to do it as kind of a small group setting, and we ended up it kind of, with the scheduling, it didn't work out, and so we did some other stuff. And what I ended up doing was I ended up teaching on it at one of our monthly meetings.
Nice.
I went through and kind of gave them the highlights of the 7 fires.
Come on.
So
I love
and
that.
if you have the YouVersion Bible app, there's also a 7-day devotion that goes with it.
Okay.
So they did one that went with the book. So each day is one of the chapters.
Yes, I'm a YouVersion fan.
Yeah.
That's how I read the Bible through. I mean, I don't know how you, without someone else charting it for you.
Right.
I don't know how. If I just opened it, I mean, the Bible looks so big, but when it's just one day, it's like,
Yep.
all right, just click this one day. All right.
What am I supposed to read today? It's going to tell me.
You're behind. Okay. All right. 2 days,
Yeah, let me try to play catch up real quick. Yeah.
Or the catch me up button. Oh, I'm not behind anymore. Let's just be honest. Let's be honest.
I'm going to need you to show me that button because I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'll show that to you. Yeah. I love that. No, that man, it's so good, Jared. We have to have a tribe of people around us. For me, it's been my Brook Hill guys. I love the cell phones now today. I mean, you can have a text message. Stephen actually called me this morning. Stephen called me this morning. I said, man, I'm actually working right now. And he's like, I don't believe it. I don't believe I caught you on that day. I was going into a meeting, so we only talked for about 10 minutes. But, but you have your friends that are calling you, texting you, I mean, it's so important for men and women. Mm-hmm. I say men especially because I feel like ladies do a better job of having friends than guys do.
Right.
I think guys, because we're more task-oriented or whatever, or bury ourselves into or we say that we're not relational. We are.
We're actually the more relational gender.
Interesting.
And so I try to push that with my guys back home, and when I get a chance, men need men. Mm-hmm. Whether you're there, David is probably the best example. Mm-hmm. And you look at David with the 30, and then even with the 3, and men need men, and we are absolutely the more relational gender. Women will immediately. You can put a group of women at a table, and they will start talking almost immediately. But unless they've all known each other for a very long time, and even then sometimes the conversation is going to be pretty surface and shallow for a while. You put a group of men that don't know each other at a table, and they're not going to talk at all. No,
we're gonna be guarded. We're gonna be measuring.
Yeah, or it's gonna be weather or hunting or some random But you take a group of guys that have known each other and have been through trials together. You take staff guys, and 30 minutes later, somebody's crying.
Oh yeah, sure.
There's junk on the table, getting dealt with, and that trying to get people to understand that. Trying to get men to understand that if you build those relationships, like we literally, it's not good that we're alone. And so men need men. Mm-hmm. And when you build that, when you get those deeper relationships, you're going to be healthier. You're going to be safer. You're going to be more confident. And so just trying to get that in, pushing that through our small groups back home or just random conversations with people, whether it's coworkers, people at church, old friends, whatever the case may be, when you've been through something together and you've built that relationship, there aren't many things like that.
Well, you can be honest with each other. You can be transparent. I mean, I can't. When you need something, that phone call, to be able to call them and say, "Hey, man, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what to do here." And you got those guys that'll be honest with you. That's my favorite thing. I know if I have a question, I just call my guys. Mm-hmm. And they will help me through it.
Well, I know you talked about being thankful for the phones, but even more so, there are times where I don't feel like this as much, but being thankful for like Facebook and social media. So I wasn't on staff with a lot of those guys that were ahead of me. Obviously, they were ahead of me, but they're still ahead of me in life.
Right.
And thanks to social media, I get to watch that. Mm-hmm. So I have 2 kids. They're young. I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. Mm-hmm. Not even quite 1 yet. And there are so many questions in my head.
Right.
What's this? What does it look like? How am I going to do this? I helped and worked with thousands of kids, and now I'm responsible for 2. But I know, because I've spent the last however many years, 6, 8, 10, 12 years watching Mitchell and Maylee, and you and Melissa and Steven and Katie, and I've watched these people, and I've read the post where we messed up and this is how we fixed it, or we did this and we rocked it. I see the date night, the daddy-daughter date nights. I see the father-son camping trips. I see and stuff that y'all are just living life.
Right.
But because of relationships and stuff that happened a decade ago, 15 years ago, and social media, y'all are still helping. You're still doing. And so, and I know y'all are there. It's a phone call or a text message, but a lot of times I don't need it because I already know. I know what the lesson is. There are several times I don't need to call Steven and ask him what he thinks because I already know.
Because he lets you know.
Because he lets me know. And so
I love that.
It's looking for the good of the social media. There's a lot of negative in social media.
We're always down on it, and rightfully so. But that is such the positive of the connect. You know, instead of, hey, what happened to so and so? It's like, I see what so and so's doing. You know, that man, that is so good. Which, you know, Trevor and Lily and Olivia are all working this summer together. It was really, really cool. And so, which you threw out a book. I want to recommend Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules.
Okay.
He has a chapter in there on parenting that we just listened to the other day. Melissa was like, "Is this a parenting book?" I was like, "No," but it was so good. I need to check. It was like chapter 5 or 6 or somewhere. Okay. Even if you just read that one chapter, you'd be good.
Gotcha. But
so good on the age you're at now, the 1s and 2s.
Okay.
I was shocked. I was like, "Wow, that's actually yes, that works. That's good." So anyway, of course, who am I to affirm Peterson, right? Like he needs my affirmation. Man, that is so good, Jared. And I absolutely love that. I mean, what you're doing with the men's ministry, that, you know, we were talking about the Brosm. I don't know if I went into it a whole lot, but it's every other Sunday night in the spring. It's like 8 Sunday nights where we have these high school and college kids get on, and Jay has one, I have one. We have separate groups, and we're just challenging them to be men.
Yeah,
we're just challenging them to step up, and these guys actually aren't even on all summer staff, most of them yet. They're the junior counselors up and coming, and so that's
awesome.
Yeah, so that's who we're connecting with. We have some all summer staff on there, kind of helping us lead, but yeah, I wanted to see those 15-year-old and up really get challenged, and gosh, we have a faithful group. I think I have like 10. Jay's got like 10 on his group. And they're a faithful group of guys and just speaking truth into their lives. I mean, I love men's ministry is my point. And our goal, Tyler and I, we were talking, we want a men's movement. You know, that was our goal there. So
I actually think we're seeing it happen. And to give you a little background on that, so we every year for the past several years we go to Men's Summit. It's a men's conference at Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas.
Love it.
And so they do a women's conference called Pink, and they do Men's Summit for the men. And for years, Pink it always sells out. They used to sell out the main auditorium. They had overflow. They'd rent out a big building or a venue in Fort Worth and do overflow and all that stuff. Men, it's like a 4,500 person sanctuary, maybe half. Well, last year it sold out for the first time.
Wow. Okay.
And this year it's probably going to sell out as well.
Okay.
And so
that's a great sign.
Seeing men's stuff across the board, we're starting to see traction. We're starting to see growth and movement. Men are buying in. They're seeing the value in being around other men and getting involved, being vulnerable. And you're just, especially places where you're seeing men find freedom and just breaking loose on that. And so, I mean, I went from, I think 5 years ago, we took 8 guys to that conference, and this year we're taking over 30.
Wow!
And so almost a third of the men from our church.
And the impact that's going to make on your church, community, families, kids.
I sure hope so.
It will.
That's the plan. Yeah.
No, it will. I mean, that's what Jesus showed us to do. Was the discipleship movement. It's still going on today, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
I mean, you know. I love that.
But you're seeing that across pretty much anywhere that there has been somebody pursuing men for a period of time, somewhere in the last 18 months, it was like a switch just got flipped. And so I'm kind of excited. I'm watching it happen. You're seeing all the revivals and stuff take off across college campuses, and there's no telling where that's going to kick off and lead to.
I love that. Well, man, Jared, I appreciate you coming on here and hanging out with us. And, man, just thank you for serving your community, for being that man that your community needs, your church, and looking forward. I mean, we're counting down the days. What are we, 6 years away now from getting the Kilpatricks here at camp? That's what we're counting down, Tyler.
That is crazy to think about. I'll be dropping a kid off as a camper in a couple years.
That is, so 2 years old. That's your oldest. And so, we lowered second graders.
I've heard
can now come to camp.
I've heard.
So
there's a lot of changes.
Yeah. Oh, a lot of fun changes. 2 weeks back though.
Yeah.
2 weeks is back.
So it's really funny because almost everybody else that's been on this podcast, when you said something about 2 weeks, they were like, "I'm so excited it's back." I was probably the only senior counselor. I never experienced 2 weeks as a camper. Never.
Okay.
And so I get here, even as a JC, the most I ever worked was 3 weeks. So
Okay.
I get on all summer, and y'all are like, "Hey, we're bringing back 2 weeks," and I was like, "You're doing what?"
Yeah. Well,
I have no idea what I'm doing.
So 2007, you were still doing the 2 week. I think it was 2008 we dropped it.
We did 2 years. So my last year we didn't.
Okay. So 07 and 08.
But I never even JC'd it.
Okay.
And so I always
So
JC'd
that first
1 week
2 weeks,
session.
you were like, "What are we doing?"
So I show up for all summer, and like week 1, week 2, week 3, we're cruising along, learning everything's good. And then we get to 2 week, and I had no idea what was
the biggest shock to you? What was the biggest surprise? Fish out of water, coming up with the cheers. Were you like, "This is not me at all"?
All of Olympics.
All of it.
I'm not very competitive.
Okay.
Especially if I know if it's something I don't particularly care about.
Yeah.
Just not a super sports oriented
Neither was
guy.
Blake. Blake wasn't competitive, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. And so I remember conversations with Steven where I was like, "I'm just not competitive," and he was like, "You better get competitive because your kids are." And
Yeah.
I was like, so for 2 weeks, especially for Olympics, I fake it till you make it. I was in it. I was coming up with the cheers and the chants and the banner and the yelling for my guys, and the whole time I'm like, this is ministry, this is sacrifice, because this is not me at all.
I'm guessing you never won.
I'd probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
But tug of war had to be your favorite though.
Oh yeah. I was always the anchor.
Blake didn't beat you in tug of war.
No, I don't. Well, you can't say that because he also had a
Right.
cabin that was twice the size of mine. So,
Oh, that's true. Mustangs. Here we go.
So
yeah.
you'd always end up with a 12 kid cabin up against a 20 something kid cabin.
Yeah.
But no, it was. I'm glad I got the experience.
Yeah.
And then my last summer on, we dumped 2 week, and I'm like, man, I kind of like this. We're doing 8 straight weeks, and then week 8 was the swine flu. So
That's
literally
awesome.
my last week at camp.
Did you survive the swine flu? Were you one that made it the whole week?
That's debatable.
That was debatable.
So the bottom line is we were all sick. Anybody that says they weren't sick that week.
That's awesome.
No.
I actually did. I didn't.
So Thursday night at Devo's, I start I'm coughing. I was rest time that day. We had extended rest time.
Yep.
And I was shivering in my bunk. I was sick.
Okay.
But none of us were saying anything. It's the next to last day before the end of the summer. It's my last summer.
Right.
And Steven hears me coughing. And Friday morning he comes and pulls me from breakfast and is like, you need to go to the doctor. I was like, please don't make me go. Please don't make me go. So I end up going, test positive, come back, and he's like, you got to leave the ranch. And I was like, I don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
He was, it's the staff banquet
Right,
and all. It's the
right.
next day. And I was like, please don't make me go.
Yeah.
So he's like, look, one of the back rooms down the hallway in the pavilion, move all your stuff out of the cabin.
So you got quarantined then.
So literally the last 24 hours
Yeah.
of my camp career,
Yeah.
I was down the hall in a room by myself
That's tough.
listening. I played bass for the band.
Oh.
And I remember the last day, I'm like, well, that's up on stage. That's not a problem. I'm not around campers. And I walk out, and he's like, get back. So like your last graduation, all that, it rained. So carnival night was in the pavilion.
Oh, so you got to hear it.
So
It was punishing you.
Oh, it was rough. And then he comes and gets me for actual like closing ceremonies, and I get to come out and I can't stay in my chair. I get to like walk through and get my little torch and do all that stuff, and I'm just bawling.
Yeah.
Like this is
torture.
This is how camp ends for me.
Right.
And so y'all actually, I don't know if you remember, but y'all gave out shirts at staff.
Oh,
banquet
I do remember.
of who survived.
Did you
and
get
I didn't
one?
get one.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, I survived it. I was
one.
there.
Tyler's got one?
No, I was a JC.
You were a JC and you got one. Oh,
I was like, I didn't leave. I stayed on the ranch. I survived. And Steven was like, sorry, you didn't. I was like,
that's so tough.
So that's how my camp career ended.
I love it. I love it. That's so fitting. That's so fitting. Oh, my goodness. Good times.
Yep.
Good times, Jared. Man, camp just does so much in a kid's life. And so I know it changed mine. It changed yours, changed Tyler's. And so, man, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience. And, we have people that listen. I always say it's a nationwide because I have at least 3 or 4 friends that are in other states that listen. Yeah. So appreciate you being on, Jared. Thanks for your service and love your family. Can't wait to have your kids at camp. So
awesome. Looking forward to it.